Hello, welcome, do come in. This is the Guillem Balague podcast, a new strand on my YouTube channel. I'll be interviewing some of the biggest stars in football, in the arts, culture, lifestyle, and you'll hear them talking in a way that perhaps you've never heard them before. In fact, the first one is Gareth Southgate. That's what's coming next. And I bet you never heard Gareth Southgate talking like this. So I've read so much about how loyal you were to your clubs, the three clubs you were in, 18 years, your leadership skills. You were captain of Palace at 22.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
About that you're a good guy, that you coach in beliefs which are different to what you normally get in England, but they're becoming more and more popular. I don't know much about Gareth Southgate, the person. So is it because you don't get asked, or is it because you don't want to talk about that?
Good question. I think a bit of both, really. I guess all of us, people see the public persona. So I know the players I played with or the players I work with, everybody has the view that they see on the pitch, which is one part of the person. And then, although there's always traits of you as a person within your performances, there's also a more personal and private side to everybody that maybe doesn't express itself, because you, to a degree, you're going on stage when you play, and you're taking on the hopes and the dreams of the supporters and the club and everything else. So you're stepping onto another level, really. The most players I know then prefer to be away from the spotlight, and I suppose I've always been conscious that train really hard, work really hard, play hard, but then I'm quite happy to disappear in the background. Really, we live up in Yorkshire. It's
where about?
Well, we live up in Yorkshire.
Somewhere very, very private. But I meant in a town or in a city?
We're out in the village.
That's where you go Harrogate. Back to.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And actually, I've always liked my own space, so I give a lot of energy when I'm working with people. I think it's important to give energy, and when I was a young player, I wanted to be the first to the training ground, the first in all the running, the last one up if we were going for a drink, then first back again the next day. So at some point you've got to re-energise, and obviously with management as well, then that's crucial, because you need to have enough energy for the whole staff, all of the players, everything else that surrounds the team. So then some people get their energy from being around other people, and I know I need time to sort of disappear and just think about things and re-energise that way. So for me, it's nice to be out of the way, so that if I'm going into the town, nobody bothers where I live. It's not the middle of London where there's a lot higher profile, I suppose.
So we are at St George's Football Centre. How long is it the drive from here to home? Don't tell me exactly.
No. We're about 2 hours.
2 hours, okay. So, what do you listen to when you?
A mixture, really. So sometimes, most of the time, music. From right across my 30 years of playing, because it's nice that the nice thing about being involved with the dressing room with young players and with my own kids is that you stay reasonably current.
Okay, what are you listening now at the moment?
Everything. Honestly, absolutely everything. So, my son's got Post Malone on, and everything right through.
Last concert you've been in?
Last concert.
Oh,
last concert. Oh, I've not been for a while, because again, with the change of, I saw Roberto at a concert get filmed dancing in the aisles, Roberto Martinez. So I'm not sure that's a good position for me to be in. So, but I mean, historically, my favourite bands were bands like U2 and Bon Jovi, those sorts of bands. But yeah, I've been in a really diverse dressing room all my life, so you pick up music tastes from everybody, which is quite nice actually, because I can put any radio station on and slip into one part of my life. You know, there's moments where you like to be reminded of happy times and draw on memories from games you played or moments of your life, but then there's times to push forward. Okay, what are the new releases and where's music heading?
So there's a new viruses and all the LPs are disappeared. They're not LPs anymore. CDs, no, not even that. It's streaming now, isn't it? All the music disappears apart from one album that you can keep. Every one of us can keep one album. So which one would it be for you?
Probably U2, Joshua Tree.
Memories or what they sing about? Or?
Yeah, I think memories of a time in my life, really. Probably a young player growing up at Crystal Palace, part of a team that were all a similar age, young players with it all ahead of us. So in our youth team and in our reserve team there, we had people like Chris Powell, who went on to play for England, Chris Coleman, who obviously has gone on to have a fantastic career. Stan Collymore was in the reserves with us. So we had players that came in from lower divisions or through the youth system or from non-league. And the first team then were Ian Wright and Mark Bright. We couldn't get in, but we also loads of those guys have gone on to exceptional careers in different fields as well.
So the 2 hours drive and you get home. Once you walk home, what's the first bit of football you see inside the house?
Well, the television.
Yes. But a companion for all of you coaches.
Apart from, normally I'm now getting home at 10 o'clock at night because usually I'm coming home late from a match, or if I've had a full day at St George's, maybe I don't leave here till 7 o'clock at night, something like that. So, but there's no football in our house in terms of memorabilia or anything other than in the office I have. There's nothing outside of that. In fact, I'm not sure there's any pictures of me anywhere other than that. There's pictures of all the rest of the family and probably the dogs, but because again, I never wanted my family to be, okay, football's the most important thing. It's important for them that I'm just dad, and when I'm at home, and the football is separate, really.
In the recent book I wrote with Pochettino, he told me that home was a harmony, that his wife Karina was absolutely crucial because she created a harmony, and he went there to either re-energize or to disappear as well. So he'll be sitting, listening, but not being there. Do you go through all that as well? Is that where home is for you? Yeah,
I think maybe the older you get, the more I like to be at home because actually you spend so much time away, so much time travelling. So the challenges of this job are different to a club where they're in a relentless day after day, week after week, every result, every weekend, midweek. This is slightly different. You know, my role is, of course, results with the senior team and all the planning and the preparation that goes into that. And then going in to watch all the club matches and trying to go to visit players at the clubs. But then you've got the work with all the junior teams as well. And then you've got the responsibility as an ambassador for English football, really, which is lots of different commercial things, charity things, dinners, appearances. So you're trying to get the balance of all of those things. You have a chance to make a difference. You know, I know in the role I'm in, that's why I have to be careful at times what I say and what I do, because I know it carries more weight, not because it's me, but because of the role, because of the title of the role. But the positive is you can make a difference in areas that that can be important for society or can be important for young people especially. So you're trying to balance that across all of the week, really. And then you go home and then you switch the door off. Oh, no, how do you say? You close the door off, you put your slippers on, and that's a different person. So you can be mask off basically. So how is Gareth Southgate that? Yeah, just... is he funny, or is it just well, that would severe, that would be a matter of opinion. My kids would say no, cheesy, probably. You know, they'd say, I guess you, you just try to be there. You know, one of the nice things, I had a period out of the game when I left Middlesbrough as manager, where I had the chance to go and see my kids play for their teams in the different sports they were playing, and actually to watch them grow up a bit. Now, my daughter's at university and my son's close to his GCSEs, so they're through a lot of their developmental phase. So it's been nice actually having dedicated my whole life to football. I had a little period where there was some flexibility to watch some of their growth, which is important because those years are nearly gone now, and before I know it they won't be coming on holiday or they won't be doing the normal things. Yeah, they're the most important part of my life. So
you're talking about you wanted to be the first one at training ground. When you were a kid, everybody tells these stories about you. Where did you learn that? Who show you that that's the way?
Yeah, it's a good question because my dad was a massive influence on me in that he always had an interest in sport. He used to coach athletics, still does. He's 80 odd. He coaches athletics at the local athletics club. So when I look back, there were always coaching books or personal development books in the house, and I probably used to pick them up and pick up ideas. Yeah.
How old were you when you started?
Even from 14, 15,
right.
Because he'd have books on top Olympic performers or tennis players, or so when I look back, that definitely had an influence on my thinking as a player. I wasn't a natural talent. I was a player that maximised what I had, and so reading all of those things, I think probably helped me.
And I'm sure you were helped by the fact that schoolboy at Southampton, and you were told you're not good enough. How old are you then?
Yeah, 13. So Southampton had regional centres, which was quite forward-thinking for the time. They had one in Newcastle, one in Slough, one in Crawley, where I grew up. And they had maybe 16, 20 boys trained at the regional centre. If you did well, you went down to Southampton, trained there for a week. So at that time, I'm same age group as Alan Shearer. But their youth team was really strong then. They had Matt Letizia, Shearer, Benali, the Wallace brothers. So they had better players than I was. And I was physically quite a late developer as well.
Remember the day you were told?
Well, I got a letter.
All right.
I've still got the letter. I've still got the letter at home because it was typed but not personalised.
Okay.
So, and I guess you're using those things as motivation. Okay, I'll come back and prove a point. So Palace were our local club, and I had trained with them odd times previously, and the Sunday team I played for had a bit of a link with Palace. I went to Palace at sort of 15, got in their South East Counties team, which was the under-18s.
So it didn't really kill the dream of wanting to be a professional footballer?
No, not at all.
It was just like, okay, not that way, we go another way.
Yeah. Right. I mean, at the time, I don't think you really know what's required or how difficult that journey is going to be. And now, when I talk to young players, we have under 15 internationals come in, and you have to say to them and the parents, look, it's brilliant that you're here, but even at your age, we don't know if you're going to be a professional long term, never mind a senior international. So you should be proud of getting to this point, but the journey from here is still really difficult, and always how you recover from the setbacks, and maybe how you or how you handle the success is key.
I found it a bit cruel when I hear all these academies at 16 telling players, sorry, you're not going to be a player. I don't know if there is there any other way, or is that part of learning in life and in football? Well,
I think any talent program, in the end you have to make decisions, and of course that's never an easy conversation, and sometimes it's the end, and for lots of players it just means that you end up at a different path because you decide, well, lots of players are released from bigger clubs, go to a smaller club, play league football, find their way back. So it doesn't have to be the end, but it is difficult to have a conversation with a kid and you're finishing the dream, really. And that's why I think when we make decisions on giving schoolboy contracts or asking young players to train with the clubs is a big responsibility to society, really. Do we really think this boy has a chance, or this girl has a chance now? Because it's a huge thing in their life.
But having said that, you all carry with you, the ones that eventually make it, which is 1% or whatever percentage it is, you already think this is it. So, okay, as you said earlier, if it's not this way, it's that way. So, for instance, you had, 100 games in the reserve teams at Palace.
Yeah.
Is it still a record?
Probably.
So you were told a lot of times, not this weekend. You go with the reserves. How did you take that? Did you thought, so what? Okay, I'll train harder.
Yeah, I mean, I was playing in the reserves from when I was 17, so it was 3 seasons really of quite difficult, because in those days reserve matches were midweek. Very occasionally on the Saturday, if the first team were away, you were at home. Or so yeah, there came a point. I mean, I always dedicate myself to training, and okay, I've got to keep improving. But there did start to come a point where, is this going to happen for me? And am I going to have to leave to go somewhere else? And then not so many players went on loan. It wasn't a big thing at the club I was at. But also Palace had a fantastic team then. They finished 3rd in the top division, made the cup final, then the following year finished 3rd in the top division. So you could understand the manager saying we had a consistent team. He probably only used 16 or 17 players that year, if that. So it wasn't so easy to break in at that moment. And
so you kind of understood what was going on, but you couldn't be this tough. You must have been having people helping you, pushing you on, or telling you, you know, we believe in you. Who were those guys or those women?
Yeah, really, my youth coach at Palace, Alan Smith, then became assistant manager with Steve Coppell, and later became first team manager. And he was, I think there's a moment where your parents probably don't understand the world you're in anymore, and you need outside advice and help. And Alan is still somebody I talk to just as a friend, and his life experiences were brilliant. And when you talked about the work ethic, I mean, he used to work in the centre of London because Palace couldn't pay a full-time youth coach at the time, so he worked for a property company, then used to come and take us for training, might take the reserves, then drive back to the city. So you were surrounded by people with a good work ethic. And also at Palace we had a lot of guys who'd come from non-league. Alan Pardew, Dennis Bailey, who played centre forward for Queen's Park Rangers, Stan Collymore. You had a lot of guys who'd had to work for a living, then came into the club, and they made you aware of how lucky we were to be professionals, and that we're doing this for a job, and to train for 3 hours is nothing, you know, a full day's work. We used to have a guy play, we couldn't always field a full reserve team, so we had a guy who used to play for Carshalton Athletic, used to work at Covent Garden in the fruit and veg market at the crack of 4:00 in the morning, used to come and play for us in the reserves in the afternoon and was our best player. And the coach used to say, look, he's been up since it was Bobby Armitt, I think he works in television now, and he used to say, Bobby Armitt's our best player, he's been up since 4 a.m, and look at you, like, what chance have you got? So there were all those kind of people around you that made you aware how fortunate you were, but also you've got to dedicate yourself to your job.
But in a way you were lucky because you were home. So you went back at the end of the training session, you were home, and there's so many players, coaches that actually had to leave home at 13 or 12 or 11. But when was there was a moment that you had to leave everything you knew, and what happened there? Where you feel that you were prepared for that jump? Yeah,
I think really, I moved out of home with mum and dad at sort of 21, something like that, so not young at all. But that definitely, again, took on another level of responsibility, because now I've got a mortgage to pay, and I need to earn the next contract to be able to pay that, and now just breaking into the first team, so the responsibility of playing in matches that matter, and People's livelihoods are depending on it. So yeah, I had a nice progression in many ways. Although the club was it was a fight every day in training, because the competitiveness of the players at that time and their backgrounds and where we'd all come from. That was it was a bit like the old Wimbledon spirit of the crazy gang. We had a lot of guys who'd been at Wimbledon, and you had to stand your corner and fight your ground to battle your way through. And it really was maybe wasn't the perfect football education, because our style of play was very direct and percentage football, but gave us lots of other attributes of mental toughness and physical resilience that have probably stayed with me forever, really.
And in fact, you changed positions as well throughout your early ages. What were you better at? Take centre back away.
Well, I was always a midfield player when I was younger, but then at Palace I broke in the team at fullback, and I was always better actually with the game in front of me. So playing in midfield, I could get away with it there because we went very direct back to front. I only had to watch it go over my head and run and get the second balls and get in the box, and I could score goals. So, but really, games I played at centre back, or my strongest attributes were to be able to read the game well and anticipate danger. And so, of course, having played in midfield at the back, you've got more time, and I was able to be a footballing centre back rather than a midfield player that wasn't technically good enough.
So really the progression of your football career was different. You weren't a specialist, but you started to understand the game in a bigger way. But I calculate that 2 years into getting to the first team, you were captain. And I'm pretty sure, is it 2 years more or less?
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure at that time I thought, I deserve to be captain. I'm just, I'm strong enough mentally, and I've shown everybody that I can. But you look back now. Were you ready?
Well, I don't think in any position of responsibility you're ever 100% ready.
So what's important then when you get given the opportunity?
Well,
not to doubt.
Yeah, I mean, at that time I did have doubts, because I had 34, 35-year-olds who I knew would be saying, well, why him? And they were probably correct in that I was the captain because the reserve manager had been moved up to the first team, and he knew he could trust me and he knew what I could bring. But you've still got to convince then the 34, 35-year-olds to follow you. So then it was more about example. I was always vocal, but it had to be about, okay, I've got to be leading everything. I've got to be in first. Challenges, tackles, making sure that nobody could ever question my commitment to training or anything else.
You've got a point to prove all of a sudden. So instead of just enjoying your football at 22, you have to just be. I remember talking to Lallana, and he was saying he didn't enjoy that at all when he was given the opportunity at Southampton of being a captain, because he had to do a lot of things that perhaps weren't good for his game.
Yeah,
you went through a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, I think at different times in my career, certainly at Villa as well and at Middlesbrough, you end up having more responsibility. If you're the captain, when you lose, you've got to be the one that faces the media. You've got to stand up for everything. So there's no doubt there are times, I think, for any captain where it detracts a little bit from your personal performance, because you've got to give of yourself for the club, for your teammates, for everything, really. And
is that why you're sharing the responsibilities now with the national team, so they don't have to bear that?
I think there's partly that, because I think it's important that responsibility is shared. I think I've experienced it myself, but also seen it with England, where too much falls on a few players, and other players are able to slide under the radar without actually having to face the music if we lose or if things don't go so well. And also, to win matches, different people have to step up at different times and take responsibility. It might be a defender, it might be a fullback. It doesn't always have to be the creative midfielder or the centre forward. So trying to give people some experience of leadership, trying to share the responsibility. But also I'm aware that, I've said before, when Wayne, as captain of England, shouldered huge responsibility in everything, and I didn't think that was fair.
You become so serious, all of you, when you talk about England. So serious. It's a game. It's a game. It should be a game first and foremost. But I guess the responsibility sometimes is heavy on your shoulders, and even your faces change. But so you must have had a day in football that you look back at, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a win. A moment that comes back to your mind where perhaps you had to become a problem or something. What's the situation, the moment in your career as a footballer that you go back to?
I think, goodness me, you have so many that you link to different attributes that you had to go through. I mean, relegations as a player with the under-21s and with some of the senior team, I showed them, 2 pages really of my career. One with the things I won, which wasn't as many as I wanted to win, wasn't the number of successes I wanted, because I was trying to explain what motivates me now. And then the other page was all the things that have gone wrong and the times you were dropped. And so you go to 4 major tournaments, but actually played every minute of the first one, but that ends up with a penalty shootout defeat. Went to France, started in 98, but then I got injured during the tournament, and the last 2 tournaments hardly kicked a ball. So on your CV it says you've been to 4 major tournaments, but the realities of what that looked like is very different. So as a player, and of course as a coach, but if I'm talking about my playing, you're constantly challenged and having to prove yourself every time you walk across the line, because there could be a setback to come. There's loads of brilliant days and lots of good moments.
It's a fight, isn't it, between you want to be comfortable. That's what you aim for. That's your dream as a person, but as a footballer. But you push to be uncomfortable constantly. So does that at some point make you dislike the challenge or dislike the game a little bit, or as a footballer?
No, for me, no. I think you're aware that the professional game is different to the game you started playing as a kid, when it was just for enjoyment, and the closer you can get to that feeling, the better. So I think there's a period in the middle of your career where you lose that. At the start, you have the innocence. At the end, you recognise what you're about to lose, and you know most of what you need to know. You've been through most of the playing experiences, so you understand the game. Your legs can't take you as quickly. But
so you hate your body at that point.
Yeah, but your body's there in the right position because your brain's working more quickly. But I think in the middle is the danger bit, where you're aware of the consequences of failure, and that's the risky part for your enjoyment. I think either side, the bookends are lovely, because you really embrace everything about it and recognise how fortunate you are and just enjoy it for what it is. So that's what I'm always trying to embed into the players, that I want them to be as good as they might be. And sometimes we inhibit ourselves because we put barriers on ourselves, or coaches put barriers on players as to what's possible. And
fear.
Yeah.
I've got the impression in this country fear is such a huge factor in kids, but also in professionals. They're scared of making mistakes.
Yeah.
And football is a mirror of society, so you see it everywhere where you look. Have you tried? Well, did you go through that? Did you have to battle your own fears as a player?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's partly football upbringing. So what's nice when I watch kids football now is that, because most kids football is run by dads, parents, they run the team. So now they watch a lot more European and world football, and they've seen different styles of play, and there's more acceptance of trying to play from the back and giving the ball away, and so everybody's football education has been enhanced by watching European football over the last few years. And of course, when I was starting, it was get it out of there and get it forward, and don't give it away, and don't do this and don't do that. And then as a young player, if we lost, we were killed because for making mistakes, and we're locked in the dressing room for hours. And so naturally the brain works in a certain way, I think. And
you were told off once because you were playing the SAS or the British Army, and what happened? They lost 3-0, and what did you do?
Yeah, we went and shook hands with all the opposition.
Oh
yeah,
my God.
I mean, it's the.
How did you do that?
Yeah, but
You were told off because you did that?
Yeah. Because the mindset at the club was, okay, that they were trying to raise our awareness of the importance of results. There's the point where you've got to move from learning the game to learning how to win.
How old were you then?
We would have been 18, 19.
Right,
so, yeah, I think that is a point at which winning, but also how you learn to win is many different things. There's a lot of tactical things that we didn't learn, or managing the game that we didn't learn, whereas there was a lot of emotion around not making mistakes that cost your team. And so I think I'm sure generations of footballers grew up in this country. Absolutely what you say. Was there the joy of the game anymore, because it was just play and win, and we weren't thinking about the processes of improving and practicing and more tactical awareness, more technical ability, which when I look at our academies now, the technical level of the players and their tactical understanding, because of the different coaches they've been exposed to, is a way higher level than we were ever at.
And in a way, thank God that in the FA there are people that think that way, because now you've already seen the consequences with the young sides. But before we get into that, talking about mistakes, if you had not missed that penalty, would you be here?
I don't know. I don't know if that has determined the career path I was going to take. But in terms of the resilience and the what I've had to develop as a person, then I might not have survived as a manager and survived my career without going through all of that. So there's elements of it that have definitely given me the strength to take other challenges on.
What was it like when you finally, having got everybody's hawk and don't worry, you'll be all right thing, when you were on your own? Do you remember?
Yeah, the biggest thing at the time, the immediate thing, was the teammates that you're letting down. So, of course, outside of that is the supporters and the country, and of course it was a unique tournament because we're at home, so the emotion of it all was so much higher, and the enthusiasm for the tournament and the excitement for the tournament was bigger than anything really. 1990, because the semi-final of a World Cup, similar 66 before my lifetime. So in modern terms, the biggest. And of course, as a team, we hadn't played well in every game, but we'd had some really good performances.
You should have lost against us.
We should have lost to Spain, yeah, absolutely. So then people like Stuart Pearce at the time, although he actually came out of retirement, but he announces he's retiring, and I'm thinking, I mean, these guys, this is the last chance they had of winning something. And now, as a coach, I would always be looking at the collective, and we didn't lose just because of one thing. There were chances we could have taken. There was
still believe that though.
But as a player, no chance that you think all of that.
You still owe them?
I still
owe them. Owe the players, England, the fans. You still owe them?
Well, you have to live with that responsibility for your whole life. So
you could repay that somehow.
Yeah, I guess the perfect scenario is that's what happens. And of course that is additional motivation for me, because having lived through what I've lived through, and let's be frank, walking in my shoes has been difficult for long periods and has meant abuse from people as well as anything else. But those things just galvanise you to show people that, okay, you've got to go on in life and you've got to go on to the next challenge and what's possible. So and I also know that not everything works out like a fairy tale, that there's a wonderful ending. So I'm worldly wise enough to know that's the case, but I'm massively patriotic and hugely proud of my country. So the chance to represent my country as a player and then to manage my country into a World Cup is something that's very, very special.
I always asked about the retirement, the date or the days before, how the decision was made, because it tells you a lot about the person and if you were prepared for it. So do you remember the first day you didn't have to go to training?
Well, for me it was unique because we played UEFA Cup final with Middlesbrough. Steve McLaren then became the England manager. So I went on holiday. I had a conversation with the chairman because I knew I had one more year left on my playing contract, and I said, look, I'm starting to think about doing some coaching. If the manager who comes in wants me to do some coaching, or I can start to get involved in coaching. I'm pretty much finished my UEFA B at that point. If I can have an input and I can help and start to go in that direction, that would be great. So that was noted. Then as the summer progressed, I don't think the chairman could get the people he really wanted. So I know.
Do you remember who they were?
Well, I know Terry Venables was one,
Right.
and Martin O'Neill was another. So I don't know what reasons they were. Maybe they read that we weren't going to have the money to spend. So then I'm on holiday in America, and I get a call from the chairman to say, look, I'd like you to think about taking the job. And of course that then was something huge to consider, because I wasn't really prepared. We said earlier about being prepared for leadership positions. When I look back now, it's a ridiculous pathway to go, to finish playing one day and to be the manager without having taken youth team. So when I'm talking to guys that are finishing like Steven Gerrard and Scott Parker and people, Frank Lampard, don't follow the path I went, because you could disappear forever doing that.
What was your biggest mistake at that point that you learned from?
Well, you're just learning from every situation you're in. Everything is new. Mm-hmm. So planning a pre-season, do you really know how you want to play? I'm with a group of players that I was their teammate a month before. I've got to manage a group of staff, which was a dynamic I'd never really thought about. I just thought the staff will, they're older people, so they get on with things. It's more complex than the players very often. You've got a recruitment. Every meeting I was in, every game I was involved in was a huge learning experience, and so that's stressful because you've not got any evidence of what works. So you have ideas in your mind that you think will work, but you don't have evidence of the results to back that up. And I didn't have a clear picture, not really clear picture of how I wanted the team to play. You had to work with the resources we had and the players we had, and then until you have that clear picture of how you want to play, then how are you going to train and how are you going to periodise the training? So all of those things, really, I was having to get by on man management of people, which generally I got right, which was why we finished 12th and 13th in the league. But when I look now at what I knew then compared to 5 years on and then 10 years on, it's incredible, really.
You were talking about masks earlier. You went with the biggest mask you could find in your wardrobe, just putting a face that I know what I'm doing. Can I tell the Mendieta story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because obviously Mendieta had an impression of you as a player, then had a different impression of you as a manager.
Yeah.
And then for years, that impression as a manager, which wasn't very positive for all the reasons you're saying, stuck in his mind until you were man enough to go to him and says, I want to apologise. Mm-hmm. That wasn't so long ago. How did that go, and why did you have to apologise?
We were playing in a charity game at Reading. So I think we played a British Army team, and we were in the same dressing room. And I knew Mendy came to Middlesbrough as he'd been a world-class player at Valencia, and then had a difficult time at Barca and Lazio. But came into our dressing room. We won the first trophy in the club's history. and his qualities as a player, the way we played, I didn't get the best out of his abilities. Now if he was playing in my team, I'd play him as a number 8 or as a number 10 and infield. But then I didn't have all those pictures, and I didn't have a clear. I'm going back to what did we have as a team, and we had Viduka and Yakubu, so we needed to get those goals in the team, and how do I fit the other pieces around that. But as a coach that's just finished playing, I didn't have all of that in my mind. And so I've then got a senior player who I've played with, who I've got incredible respect for, but he's not in the team. I'm looking back thinking I've not managed that situation as well as I might have. And then he's ending up, because he's now a big wage earner as well, so we're having to try and move him out of the club, but he didn't really want to leave because of personal situation. So the whole thing's a bit of a mess, really, and he's ending up training with the reserves, and I'm saying to him, look, I don't really like that scenario because the respect I have for you as a player. So, yeah, there'll be some players that I managed in those first couple of years that were senior players who would have an opinion of me as a coach. Ray Parlour would be another one who, but they wouldn't have known what I was going through day to day in terms of learning, understanding, developing.
A process-less person, if that's an English word. You had not gone through the process.
No, absolutely. And so 3 years down the line, I'd have handled certain situations differently, and 10 years down the line, you have so many more of those skills, albeit I still think as a coach you learn from every game you're in and every training session and every player you deal with, but you've been through most of the scenarios you're going to face, and you're confident in the decisions you're making and the best way to treat senior players compared to young players. And I was always conscious of that, but even more conscious, but also how to get the best out of a player like Mendy, who wasn't physically in top condition to be able to play right wing and run up and down the wing, but technical player, and
he can still play.
Yeah, absolutely.
He can still play.
Yeah.
But so you sat down after that friendly and you said to him, sorry, or?
Well, yeah, I just tried to apologise that we'd played together for 2.5 years, and then 2 years really, which for him I recognised would have been miserable, and I didn't get the best out of him. Mm-hmm. And I suppose as a young coach, that's the biggest thing I'm conscious of. If you bring coaches in that aren't ready for the level they're working at, then it's the players that suffer. Mm-hmm. The supporters, of course, as well, but it's the players' livelihood.
He accepted the apology clearly.
Yeah, I hope, but even if he didn't, it's the right thing to do, because you accept that everybody has their own view of what's happened, and their own view is different to yours. But I think it was important to at least explain. If I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't have said it to him. I didn't just say it to him because he was in the dressing room. There were players there that I handled very well and got the best out of, who had probably the best moments of their career. There were some guys who got in the England squad around that time. But I knew with that one, if I had my time again, I would have handled it differently. And so why not have that conversation?
It sounds like when you got the sack at Middlesbrough, it was almost not something you were looking forward to, because nobody looks forward to that, but it was an opportunity, yet another opportunity. You could learn all those things that you did not have to be a manager you wanted to be, but because you had been in this running machine as a kid, and then grown up, and then you became a manager without having time to think about it, that running machine stopped all of a sudden. Yeah. So, okay, sacking is fine because now I've gone and learned, but all of a sudden you were not wanted by anybody. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that how he felt?
Well, initially, I applied for, I think there were a couple of championship jobs at the time, because when I went we were 1 point off the top of the championship. So Steve Gibson was really loyal the year we were relegated, stayed with it, but then made his decision, and you respect his decision. So my immediate thought was, okay, get another job as quickly as possible. And the best thing that happened was that I didn't, because then actually I needed, as you say, I'd had by then 20 where are we? 17, 23, 24 years on the treadmill of football.
All you need, really.
And I needed to go skiing and run a marathon and do things I was never able to do when I was playing, and spend time with my family. And for a period then, I did some work with the media, but also was thinking that I don't know if football is what I want to go back and do. And I think any player that finishes, it's good to try and do those things that you weren't able to do, visit places you couldn't see, or because you commit a hell of a lot to your career, physically and in terms of not sacrifice but choices on how you live your life and what you want to do.
Did you buy a motorbike?
No, I'm not a speed freak. Although skiing was as dangerous as it gets.
Is that right?
But just to have Christmas at home, those things that. By the way, that soon loses its appeal. But there are things that that players don't have the chance to do. That I think it's good. Just every Friday night you've been preparing and eating in a certain way, and I can't have a drink tonight, and I can't do this, and I can't go there at this time, and dictated around the football calendar. So for a couple of years it was nice just to have that freedom, some contact with the game, working with ITV mainly at the time, but also then starting to think, okay, well, what am I going to do in my life? And to really be able to reflect on what had happened in the previous 3 years, especially, okay, well, if I managed again, what do I need to know? What do I need to improve on? What are the areas to go and look at, go and study? And I started to do that, and I got a call from Trevor Brooking, who was, not by title, but he was effectively technical director at the FA then. And there was one of our traditional root and branch reviews of English football after the 2010 World Cup, particularly around youth football changes. How could we implement changes from junior football, so changes to five-a-side and getting kids out of full-size goals, right through the youth development teams to the review of the academies, everything. And I sat in on a lot of those discussions, and then Trevor offered me a role kind of shadowing him really and trying to implement some of those rule changes. So there was the feeling that I was contributing to the future of the game, and as a passionate Englishman, and I've always liked working to give kids opportunity, but also then I was learning back to learning. I was in all the academy restructure meetings, I was watching the national junior teams, I was better understanding of how kids learn. So as a coach, I was building a picture of different areas, travelling to some UEFA conferences, travelling to Champions League games to do technical reports, so studying the highest level matches technically and tactically, and of course the more you travel away from the island as we are, then you're embracing different ideas, different ways of thinking. Through my international career in European matches, I picked up a lot of that. Working with people like Venables was outstanding.
What was the last thing you learned?
The last thing?
Because you all say you keep learning.
Yeah.
And every day there's something. What was the last thing you learned?
Well, some of the conversations we're having now are around cognitive learning, how the brain is working, how do we get messages into the young player. So their way of communicating is slightly different. We're addicted to our phones. Okay, as parents we're always critical of that, but actually that's how kids are receiving their messages. So how do we feed information to our young players in a way that they want to embrace, they're hungry for, they'll learn from? But
we're not old, but it's a completely different world.
Yeah.
And every manager I speak to, they have the two things. One you mentioned already, and this is the second one that they struggle with. How do you get the passion from the players that they had when they were 7, 8 or 9?
Yeah.
And when you go to see the 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, when you go to see them, are they still the same kind of kids that you were when you were, and they are.
Yeah.
They love football the same way. They all follow the ball and they all love it, and they don't want it to finish, that kind of thing. But at some point, perhaps earlier than used to be, that passion kind of disappears. How do you rekindle that? And secondly, how do you communicate with people that don't talk like us?
Yeah.
Those are the two challenges you did find perhaps more clearly as an under 21 manager.
Yeah, but I think there's understanding how youngsters communicate now, but also actually we had an experience last year with the senior team. We took them to the Marines camp for a few days, and one of the things was that they had to give their phones in, that they weren't going to work there anyway, really. But what was clear was actually the guys quite liked it, because there was less pressure to immediately respond to messages from friends or on social media, and there was a chance actually to just sit. I mean, we camped out one night, so a lot of the guys had never camped, but there's a fire, people are talking.
Oh, literally? So you spend the night?
So we were outside, but the guys just enjoyed talking, learning more about each other.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, we're all, I'm the same. I'm different generation, but I'm continually referring to my phone because the ping goes and there's an email or there's a text or and actually, to have the discipline of actually putting that to one side, especially if I'm at home, because to be present and engage with the people you're with, if you're having a meal or something like that, I think it's really, really important. So
they knew they were getting the phone back the next day.
Yeah, no, of course. They knew it was a temporary situation. But I think also they recognised, actually, when we're having lunch together with the team, maybe we'll put our phones in a box before we go in the room. I don't want to have loads of rules as a coach. But I think the players thought it was quite nice to chat. And if I'm a young player coming in, and how do we make that young player feel welcome? And if we're all looking at our phones and not engaging with him, well, then how do we find out more about him? And so they have all the qualities, and sometimes we should go with technology and embrace for certain. But also I think sometimes it's good to remind and put some things that we believe to be the right way to do things, and to try and, I don't say educate, but encourage people to say, actually, have you thought about, we don't have our phones at dinner time because this reason, not because I want to put a rule in that says there's no phones, but what's the benefit of us talking as a team, maybe about the game or about life, about each other? Because I remember sitting around with some of the European players we had at Middlesbrough, Bolo Zenden and Mendy and Juninho and people like that, and that's where you learnt about the game, those informal conversations. You just learned football history, you learned about big matches, you learned about tactical things, coaches they'd worked with. And without, if we had our phones then, all of those opportunities would have been lost, actually.
Those are messages that Conte, Pep Guardiola, Pochettino are trying to develop into the minds of their players. So would you say that the players now have got more layers, they're better prepared for life, or less prepared for life, and then you have to insist on those messages?
Yeah, difficult, because I think in some aspects they are way more developed. The information that is available to them because of the internet, for example. So, God, if you're a player and you have an injury now, I'd hate to be the physio, because you can look everything up. But why are we not doing this, and this? Because they can look up diet, nutrition, fitness. There's everything online that you could want, history, whatever you want. So brilliant opportunities to learn and develop as a person. Equally, now the academy system and being integrated into a club from maybe 9-10 years old, does that expose players to other sports, other walks of life, the realities of the world out there? I think they're aware of the realities of the world, because a lot of our guys have really tough upbringings and come from difficult backgrounds. So it's not that they're naive to all of those things, but
they're still in a bubble. Yeah,
we create a bubble with good intentions to try and protect them and to give them the best chance and to give them the best of everything that we think is the right thing to help them develop. But in the end, they still have to have resilience and breadth to be good human beings and to understand the world, to really fulfil their chances as people, really. So
I want to take you to that. You said that when you were sacked, you did not know if you wanted to stay in football. So in a parallel world, you don't stay in football.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you were prepared for anything else, because football is all you knew, but what's in that parallel world? What's Gareth Southgate like? What does he do?
There would have been something. I've for quite a while had a association with the Prince's Trust.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because, funny enough, Steve Gibson was one of the first people. He supported that, and what I've recognised is that young people need others to believe in them, and whatever route you're coming from. So, why did I take the under-21 role? Well, my passion for football, and because I felt it was a brilliant opportunity to highlight what young players could do, what young English players were capable of, but also that inherent passion I've got for young people, because we all needed somebody to believe in us somewhere along the way. And in our country, huge challenges in football for opportunity for young players, young coaches, but also in society. You know, we're fighting a little bit with what our identity is as a country. Are we in Europe? Are we out of Europe? Are we? My kids are, there's a bit of a generational thing on Brexit where young people I speak to are kind of, what are we doing? We're European. We want to travel the world. We might go to America. And the older generation are kind of, well, but in the past it was this, and they're pining for something that isn't there anymore. And within all of that confusion, people are trying to work their way through it. So what does that mean for us as a football team as well? Because our football team is really diverse, which is a massive strength, powerful strength for us.
Perhaps for the first time? It used to be the north-south divide, perhaps.
Yeah,
but now it's even more diverse than that.
No, now I don't think people even think about north-south divide within the team. But also, this team is really tight. This is the first team that I can remember where lots of the players played not just at under-21s together, but maybe at under-17s, under-19s. So coming together is a little bit like I noticed when foreign players I played with that went back to play for their country. It was like, we're going home and it's fun. Mm-hmm. You talked about it being fun. And that's what we've got to try and create, that the players want to come because it's enjoyable. That's the start point for me, that there's an environment that they want to be a part of, and coming here is fun. And then if we can tactically prepare them and allow them to express their technical ability, well, we might have a chance of winning some games because they'll be mentally in a good place.
In fact, you talk about confusion, that confusion outside, in the outside world, where people they don't know anymore what it is to be English. I see it every day. And they need to hang on to something. So if you manage to get a group going, and it is going back to a certainty, that group of people, my friends, it will be, so in a way you could take advantage of that confusing situation outside.
Well, what's your hope as a national manager? People ask me what would be a successful World Cup, and I'm always saying, well, if the country are proud when we come back, that will mean we've played some good football. We'll have won some games, because they won't be proud if we haven't. And then how powerful will that be if we've got a team that's diverse and is showing modern skills? Our players are technically different to the way they used to be.
You're a romantic. They'll go and say, you've gone this far, and if you haven't, you're good. Sorry, you're not good, Emily. Because at the end, that's very good for the inside world that you're creating. Mm-hmm. You'll be able to say, look, we did our best, and you've given me what I asked you for, and look at you proudly showed what you made of. Mm-hmm. But you are in a job in which, more than any other job, any other managerial job, really, you will be judged after the game. I don't know why people are just waiting for the result to judge. Mm-hmm. Because if they do that, why do they watch the games? Yeah. We'll just text them the result and say, well, the result is 3-0. Now you can judge me. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult to actually convince everybody that there is something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think as a team and as coaches and as players, you've got to focus on what can you affect. and that's what you do every day, and that's the way that you play, and that's the way that you prepare. And the result is an outcome of all of those things, plus the opposition trying to stop you, plus the random events that can happen within football. So if it's just, which was most of my playing life, I win on Saturday, I'm good, I lose on Saturday, I'm bad, well, then as a coach and as a team we're going to have a problem. Of course, in the end, I know we will be judged on winning and losing. But that's not the way I can live my life in terms of preparing the team to perform at their very best, because I've got to try and strip back what do we need to be the best team we might possibly be, and to allow the players to be as good as they might be. I've always said John Stones is a classic example of this when we had him with the under-21s. If you want to be like I was, then carry on, and people will tell you kick it out of play and get rid of it because don't make mistakes. But if you want to be on another level, which is quite possible with the skills he has, and for others within our team who have some outstanding talent, then maybe you might have to ignore some of those people and be brave enough to try things and accept that they're not always going to go right, but you might become a world-class player, which I was nowhere near. And I think that's what we've got to embed in this group of players.
You're still swimming against the tide, but I think more and more people understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I think as a football country, I go back to, look, Guillem, you're working here now, presenting a programme that would, as a Spanish journalist coming here 15, 20 years ago, would never have happened. Absolutely. So we're all looking at Klopp and Pep and Conte and Jose and Pochettino, and so the influences on our game has changed enormously, and that's for the better. That can be for the benefit of our game. The challenge for our young players is, okay, it's harder to get a game because we can attract players from all around the world. So you've got to be one of the best players in the world to make that break. But let's embrace. Don't let's sit here and complain about it. Don't let's sit as an English coach and say, I've not got a chance. I've got to be as good as I can be and keep learning and improving to get those opportunities.
You will be seen as the manager that has gone through that transition. I hope you win something too as well. So good luck in Russia. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
So, what did you think? I enjoyed that. Did you? Actually, what was the thing that surprised you the most about this Gareth Southgate that perhaps you hadn't heard before? There'll be more like this. There'll be more conversations like those. So, do subscribe, follow me on my social platforms, and suggest things. Who do you want to hear from? Let me know, and I'll just try to please you. Talk to you soon.
Don't move your hand,